the middle class savers who put their money in banks. Life goes on.
Life does go on, but James, I'm picking that markets around the world kind of feel a little bit better because at least they sort of know where they stand. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think there's been a bit of mixed sentiment about what these stress tests actually meant and the credibility of them. I think, when you look at what happened in the US 12 months ago, then they did a similar exercise, not the same. They had different criteria. They decided that $75 billion US needed to be raised, and we've only got €3.5 billion. There's been some fairly significant issues over this time.
Printed?
Raised. They needed to raise 75.
So the answer is, you either print money and steal the wealth of the people today or create debt and steal the wealth of your children. But that is the end solution to a mayhem of debt-fed, frenzied asset inflation, is it not?
I want to take it back even further. I want to take it back to the time of the economic crisis, and I want to know, where were the economists around the world warning us that this was coming? Who got it wrong? The bankers? The regulators?
Some were warning that it was coming. But in the best tradition of hope springs eternal and the party's good today, they were ignored. And by the way, they weren't the majority either.
It's kind of scary, James, though, isn't it, when you have Alan Greenspan, who retires as a Federal Reserve chief, saying, look, the model I've been using for years is out of date. What does that tell us?
Well, I mean, I guess when we've seen such a massive shake-up and there's not necessarily a lot that, you can go back into history and decide, well, there's a precedent for this. So I'm not surprised by some of those comments because, as Bruce mentioned, that not many people did predict this. Some did, and it's important to note that some did. But we haven't seen such a major shock for, in this generation, I guess. And the last major shock was in the 30s, and, that's a long time ago now.
Now tell me, is the answer going to be free trade for a little tiny country at the end of the world like New Zealand? I look at the figures out of FedEx. Apparently they did very, very well in their earnings. This normally tells us about global trade. So apparently global trade must be going great guns. Do we need more of it?
Every economic theory and every management theory has its time, and then it eventually passes, and if you live long enough, you'll see a recurrence of past trends 2 or 3 times in a lifetime. Free trade is the current economic idiom that is gripping us. And yes, if you are a remote exporter and you wish to attack a big market, the money's on your side. If China is exporting to us, we're 4 million people. We don't rate as even as useful as Shanghai. But China for us is a huge market. And as far as that goes, that's fine. But the problem is we export rural products and always have done. Our economy has not developed one jot at a practical level in 150 years. We still export logs, beef, milk. Sure, we've got wine and a few other things to add to the mix now. But in terms of intellectual property exports and other soft exports, we're just a dot. China, on the other hand, is a huge manufacturer. They can swamp us with manufactured goods and kill our domestic capacity to produce. And that is a continuing trend. And it is a continuing trend in most small economies that get swamped by big economies. The negative of free trade is the dopes have extended it to free investment flows. So what you now have is a mouse, New Zealand, trying to out-invest and survive against an elephant, China. Thus, inevitably, it will accelerate foreign ownership, and that eventually emasculates your people and turns us into basically tenants in our own country.
John Key says that's not going to happen. No way. What do you think, James?
Well, I'd like to see that we hold on to those assets for sure, but
we'll be outbid.
There is a chance of that. We don't hold the trump card at the moment. We don't hold the equity, and Asian markets do hold it.
Well, you see, the problem is New Zealand has never accumulated or formed domestic capital.
Yeah, correct.
We have for 40 years earned $1 and spent $1.20. Ipso facto, we sell things.
And we put all our money into property. Should we be putting all our money into, for example, superannuation schemes?
No.
What's your take on that? Why not?
That's a different issue. My mantra is people need to accept personal responsibility for their lives and accept their shortcomings and get on with it. And it is a cop-out to pass your wealth to others to manage for you. It is far better for you to become literate and manage and control your own life than to trust others. New Zealand is a nation of dependence. We look to others to support our lives, be it welfare or be it fund managers. There is a declining portion of our population who accept the responsibility that goes with owning assets and are prepared to pass it off to others, and they clip a fee. And if you look at fund manager performance, it's no better than a term deposit and often worse. My advice to people is if you're planning to give other people your money to invest, leave your money in the bank because the thieving sods will take it all in fees anyway.
How on earth are we going to raise capital? That is the big problem in New Zealand. There doesn't seem to be a culture or a psyche. We are investment adverse to some of our own best deals.
Yes, we are.
How big a problem is that going to be, James?
There's going to be some short-term pain in order for us to raise that sort of equity. We've got to do it out of savings, and that's not a culture that we have in New Zealand. We're probably changing a little bit at the moment. We have seen a little bit more savings over the past 12 months, but certainly over the past few years, then that hasn't been something that we've done particularly well. So we've got to see a little bit of a change in culture over the next little while, and that's going to be it's not going to be a short-term thing. We're going to have to do that over quite a period of time, and we're already sort of seeing that a little bit in the rural sector in terms of repaying debt, trying to raise some equity, and it's not always that easy to do.
Okay, let's talk about the OCR while we're right here at home. Comes out later this week. What are you picking?
25-point hike. I think the market really is picking that also, and most banks are picking that there's going to be an increase. Everything on the cards at the moment suggests that does need to occur. I mean, when we're looking at the official cash rate, then previously prior to the financial crisis, then probably a midpoint would be about 6%, and right now we've been at 2.5% and looking to potentially go to 3%. So we're still a long way off that sort of medium monetary policy sort of stance.
Across the ditch, Bruce, of course, immigration is shaping up to be a major platform for the leaders. Here at home, migration is struggling. How is immigration policy here going to affect the way our economy grows or doesn't?
We had 70 net migrants.
Isn't that amazing?
That disguises the real number of how many came in and how many left, and that is the true measure. We have migration outflow, mostly to Australia, some to Europe, some to America, and we have inflows, and that changes the mix of our population quite dramatically. I think it's false to actually disclose the net number. They should be disclosing the Kiwis that leave and the newbies that arrive. New Zealand as a nation is now the Ireland of the 19th century. We have more of our people as a proportion of our base population living outside of our country than just about any other country in the world, and that is a travesty. What does it mean long term? I'm a huge fan of demographics as a way to actually put into context what happens in the real world and what might happen. We have baby boomers heading towards hospital care and then death, and we have women not breeding in the West, which means progressively populations fall. And Japan is a really good case study of that because they have an anti-immigration policy, and they have been in recession for what, 20 years?
A long time, yeah.
Yeah, a long time. So the trade-off for women not breeding and people getting older and dying, i.e. population decline, is economic mayhem, relatively. And the solution to that is sadly immigration. So the trade-off is if you want to continue your daydream life of today, women either have to have more kids and do so in a nice consistent manner so that there's an even pattern of people ageing, or you've got to import them. And the problem is you're not going to import the same people you're exporting, so you dumb down or change your population matrix and create a whole bunch of other stresses. The world's becoming dynamic and difficult.
Asians here, apparently, if the trends continue, are going to make